The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion. The kind that settles over a room when everyone realizes something unexpected has just happened. For years, the legal battles surrounding Michael Jackson's billion-dollar legacy had unfolded behind stacks of court filings, accounting records, attorney motions, and estate reports. Most fans never paid attention. Many assumed the estate was operating smoothly. Others believed the family had long ago moved past the bitter disputes that followed the King of Pop's death. But then came a ruling that reignited one of the most sensitive questions surrounding the Jackson empire. Who is really protecting Michael Jackson's legacy? And who controls the fortune he left behind? What happened next stunned observers on both sides of the debate. Because this wasn't a fight between strangers. It was a battle unfolding inside one of the most famous families in entertainment history. A battle involving money, power, trust, and a legacy worth billions. Court records show that Paris Jackson challenged financial decisions involving Michael Jackson's estate, raising concerns about payments approved years earlier by estate executors. What initially appeared to be a technical dispute over legal fees soon evolved into a much larger conversation about transparency, accountability, and who ultimately benefits from one of the most successful celebrity estates ever created. Then came the ruling. A Los Angeles judge sided with Paris Jackson regarding $625,000 in disputed bonus payments made to outside law firms. According to court documents, those payments were disallowed and ordered returned to the estate. The court concluded that the payments could not be justified based on the information provided during the proceedings. Suddenly, a dispute that had quietly unfolded in probate court exploded into headlines around the world. Supporters of Paris called it a major victory. Critics argued the ruling was being exaggerated. Others pointed out that the court simultaneously acknowledged the estate's long record of financial success under its current leadership. And that's where the story becomes far more complicated than the headlines suggest. Because to understand why this courtroom battle matters, you have to go back nearly 2 decades. Back to the summer of 2009. Back to the moment the world learned that Michael Jackson was gone. The shock was immediate. Television networks interrupted programming. Radio stations abandoned scheduled broadcasts. Crowds gathered outside hospitals. Fans cried openly in the streets. For millions around the world, it felt impossible. Michael Jackson wasn't simply another celebrity. He was one of the most recognizable human beings on Earth. His influence crossed generations, languages, religions, and political divisions. Albums like Thriller, Bad, Dangerous, and History transformed modern music. Stadiums filled wherever he appeared. Music videos became cultural events. Every move generated global attention. But behind the fame existed a far less glamorous reality. Financial problems, business disputes, massive debt obligations, complex ownership arrangements, and a web of legal responsibilities that would become one of the most closely watched estate cases in entertainment history. At the time of his death, reports indicated that Jackson's finances were extraordinarily complicated. Assets were valuable, but so were the liabilities. Lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, and family members suddenly found themselves navigating a situation unlike almost anything Hollywood had ever seen. Responsibility for managing the estate eventually fell to executors John Branca and John McClane, who were tasked with preserving and growing the value of Jackson's holdings. Over the years, supporters credited them with transforming a financially troubled estate into a powerhouse worth billions through licensing agreements, entertainment projects, music ventures, and strategic business decisions. The results were undeniable. Revenue surged. New projects emerged. The estate became one of the most successful celebrity business operations ever assembled. Yet success did not eliminate scrutiny. In many ways, it increased it. Because whenever enormous amounts of money are involved, questions inevitably follow. Who gets paid? How much? Why? And who decides? Those questions eventually landed at the center of Paris Jackson's legal challenge. Unlike many celebrity children, Paris spent much of her life under extraordinary public attention. From childhood appearances beside her father to adulthood as a musician, model, and public figure, she has often carried the burden of representing a family legacy larger than almost anyone could imagine. Yet, in this case, she wasn't appearing on a red carpet. She wasn't promoting a project. She was questioning decisions made inside the financial structure responsible for managing her father's estate. Court filings indicate that Paris objected to bonus payments made to outside attorneys during a period in 2018. Her argument centered on whether sufficient justification existed for those payments and whether adequate information had been provided to support them. The estate's representatives pushed back. According to statements released after the ruling, attorneys for the estate emphasized that the disputed payments were made to outside counsel rather than the executors themselves. They also stressed that the court did not find any inappropriate self-payments by estate leadership. That distinction would become incredibly important. Because as the story spread online, many social media users interpreted the ruling in dramatically different ways. Some described it as proof of deeper problems. Others viewed it as a narrow accounting dispute that had been sensationalized by headlines. The truth, according to court documents, appeared more nuanced. And nuance rarely goes viral, especially when Michael Jackson's name is involved. As coverage intensified, fans found themselves divided. One side argued that Paris had done exactly what a beneficiary should do when concerns arise. If questions existed, they believed answers should be provided. Transparency should never be optional. The opposing side pointed to the estate's extraordinary financial record. They argued that decades of successful management spoke for themselves. Without those efforts, some supporters claimed, Michael Jackson's legacy might not have generated the value it does today. Both arguments gained traction online. Both attracted passionate defenders. And neither side appeared willing to back down. What made the situation even more fascinating was the emotional layer underneath the legal language. Because every motion filed, every accounting dispute, every financial disagreement was occurring within the shadow of a father who remains one of the most discussed entertainers in modern history. For many fans, Michael Jackson isn't simply an artist. He represents memories, childhoods, family traditions, personal milestones. People fell in love to his songs, graduated to his music, celebrated life events with his records playing in the background. That emotional connection means any conflict involving his legacy immediately becomes personal for millions of strangers, and that emotional investment fuels every new headline. By the time news of the court ruling reached social media, reaction videos, fan channels, entertainment commentators, and online forums were already dissecting every detail. Some creators called the ruling a turning point. Others described it as a procedural matter. Still others saw it as evidence of a larger struggle over the future direction of the estate. The debates quickly expanded beyond the actual $625,000 figure. The conversation became symbolic. A referendum on trust. A referendum on transparency. A referendum on how iconic legacies should be managed after the people who created them are gone. And perhaps most importantly, it forced people to confront a difficult reality. Even the largest fortunes in entertainment history remain vulnerable to family disagreements, legal challenges, and competing visions of what stewardship should look like. The Jackson story was never just about music. It was always about family. And family stories are rarely simple, especially when billions of dollars, global fame, and decades of history collide. As more details emerged from court filings, observers began asking a new question. If Paris Jackson succeeded in challenging these payments, what other aspects of estate management could face future scrutiny? Would this ruling encourage additional legal actions? Would it change how beneficiaries interact with estate leadership? Could it reshape the balance of power inside one of the world's most valuable celebrity estates? Those questions remain unanswered. But one thing is certain. This legal battle has already changed the conversation. Not because of the dollar amount involved. Not because of a single court order. But because it exposed a deeper tension that has quietly existed for years beneath the surface of Michael Jackson's legacy. a tension between trust and oversight, between success and accountability, between preserving the past and protecting the future. And in the months ahead, that tension may become even more visible. Because the ruling that shocked fans wasn't necessarily the end of the story, it may have been the beginning of a much larger chapter. A chapter that could determine how one of entertainment's greatest legacies is managed for generations to come. And if recent history has taught us anything, it's this. Whenever Michael Jackson's name returns to a courtroom, the world pays attention. And the next development may be even bigger than the last. Long before this courtroom dispute captured headlines, another battle had already been unfolding quietly behind the scenes. Not a battle over music. Not a battle over artistic ownership. And not even a battle over reputation. A battle over control. Because whenever a public figure leaves behind an empire worth hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars, the most important question is rarely how much money exists. The real question is who gets to make the decisions. For the average family, inheritance disputes may involve a home, a business, or savings accumulated over a lifetime. For the Jackson estate, the stakes were on an entirely different level. This wasn't just a collection of assets. It was one of the most valuable entertainment brands in modern history. Every licensing agreement, every streaming deal, every merchandise contract, every documentary, every musical production, every song placement, every future business opportunity, all of it flowed through a legal and financial structure created after Michael Jackson's death. And that structure has generated enormous wealth. Over the years, the estate became a case study in entertainment management. Industry analysts frequently pointed to its remarkable turnaround. When Michael Jackson died in 2009, reports indicated the financial picture surrounding his affairs was deeply complicated. Debts, obligations, and contractual commitments created uncertainty about the future. Yet over time, estate leadership executed a series of deals that dramatically increased the value of Jackson-related assets. One of the most significant developments involved the continued monetization of Jackson's music catalog and intellectual property. Then came theatrical productions, tribute experiences, licensing agreements, media partnerships, global branding opportunities. Each new deal added another layer to a business machine that seemed capable of generating revenue across multiple generations. To supporters, the results were undeniable. They saw proof that estate leadership had successfully protected and expanded the legacy of one of the world's biggest entertainers. But critics often viewed the same success through a different lens. They asked whether financial growth alone should be the only measure of success. Was maximizing profits always aligned with preserving an artist's wishes? Were beneficiaries receiving enough transparency? Were decisions being explained thoroughly enough to family members whose futures remained tied to the estate? These questions did not suddenly appear after the recent court ruling. In many ways, they had existed for years. The ruling simply brought them back into public view. And as observers dug deeper, many discovered that this wasn't the first disagreement involving beneficiaries and estate management. Public records show that various disputes have emerged over the years concerning business decisions, legal strategy, and the administration of estate affairs. Most never became front-page news. Most remained buried within legal filings. But together, they painted a picture of an estate operating under constant scrutiny. That scrutiny intensified because of who Michael Jackson was. Few celebrities have inspired the same level of public fascination. Even years after his death, virtually every development connected to his legacy continues to generate worldwide discussion. For fans, this creates an unusual dynamic. Many feel emotionally invested in decisions they have no direct role in making. Some view themselves as protectors of Jackson's legacy. Others see themselves as defenders of his family. And when disagreements emerge between those groups, social media often turns into a battlefield. That is exactly what happened following the court ruling. The legal details were complicated. The online reaction was anything but. Across YouTube, X, Facebook, TikTok, and fan forums, thousands of people immediately began interpreting the verdict through their own personal beliefs. Some viewed Paris Jackson as a whistleblower. Others viewed her as a beneficiary exercising a legitimate legal right. Still, others argued that the ruling had been blown out of proportion. Videos appeared claiming massive victories. Counter-videos accused commentators of misleading audiences. Threads stretched into thousands of comments. Arguments erupted between longtime supporters who previously stood on the same side of debates involving Michael Jackson's legacy. What made these exchanges particularly intense was the emotional history attached to the Jackson name. For decades, supporters of Michael Jackson have often felt compelled to defend him from criticism. Many spent years debating allegations, media coverage, documentaries, legal proceedings, and public narratives surrounding his life. As a result, a strong culture of advocacy developed within portions of the fan community. When the estate became the subject of criticism, many supporters instinctively moved into defensive positions. Others felt the opposite. They argued that accountability strengthens institutions rather than weakens them. According to this perspective, asking questions about financial decisions should never be viewed as disloyalty. Instead, it should be viewed as responsible oversight. These competing viewpoints fueled a wave of online commentary that extended far beyond the actual court ruling. The debate became philosophical. What responsibilities do estate executors owe beneficiaries? What responsibilities do beneficiaries owe the legacy they inherit? And perhaps most importantly, how should disagreements be handled when millions of people are watching? Those questions became even more intriguing as legal experts weighed in. Many analysts pointed out that estate disputes are not unusual. In fact, conflicts involving high-value estates occur regularly. Large fortunes often generate disagreements because multiple stakeholders have different priorities. Executors may focus on maximizing long-term value. Beneficiaries may prioritize transparency and oversight. Advisors may focus on risk management. Attorneys may focus on legal protection. Each group can sincerely believe they are acting in the estate's best interests while still reaching very different conclusions. That reality helps explain why even highly successful estates sometimes experience internal conflict. Success does not eliminate disagreement. Sometimes it magnifies it. The larger the fortune becomes, the greater the scrutiny. The greater the scrutiny, the more questions arise. And the more questions arise, the more likely legal challenges become. From a business perspective, this creates a fascinating paradox. The Michael Jackson estate has often been cited as one of the entertainment industry's most successful posthumous business operations. Yet its very success ensures that every decision receives extraordinary attention. Every contract attracts analysis. Every financial report invites interpretation. Every legal dispute generates headlines. In effect, success creates its own pressure. That pressure is not limited to executives and attorneys. It extends to family members as well. Imagine growing up knowing your father's name remains one of the most recognized brands on earth. Imagine knowing that every public statement you make could become international news. Imagine understanding that millions of strangers have strong opinions about decisions affecting your family. For many observers, this human dimension is often overlooked. Court filings may focus on numbers. News stories may focus on legal outcomes. But behind every legal dispute are real people navigating extraordinary circumstances. People carrying emotional burdens few can truly understand. People attempting to balance personal relationships with public expectations. People making decisions while knowing those decisions will be analyzed by millions. That reality becomes particularly important when considering Paris Jackson's position. Whether supporters agree with her challenge or not, the case demonstrates a willingness to engage directly with the legal mechanisms governing the estate. Rather than expressing concerns publicly through interviews or social media, the dispute moved through formal legal channels. That distinction matters. Courtrooms operate differently than public opinion. Arguments require evidence. Claims require documentation. Judges evaluate records rather than headlines. and sometimes the outcomes surprise everyone involved. The recent ruling did exactly that. Even observers who closely followed the proceedings acknowledged that the decision created new questions. Would additional financial practices face review? Would future disputes emerge? Would relationships between stakeholders become more strained? Or would the ruling ultimately encourage greater communication moving forward? No one knows for certain. What is clear, however, is that the verdict altered perceptions. Before the ruling, many people assumed the estate's internal structure was largely settled. After the ruling, those assumptions became harder to maintain. Suddenly, conversations expanded beyond the specific issue before the court. People began examining broader questions about governance, oversight, and accountability. Some industry observers even suggested the case could influence how other celebrity estates operate in the future, not because the dollar amount was enormous compared to the estate's overall value, but because the ruling reinforced an important principle. Transparency matters. Documentation matters. And even highly successful organizations may face challenges when questions arise about decision-making processes. That lesson resonates far beyond the entertainment industry. It applies to corporations, charities, family trusts, investment funds, and virtually any institution responsible for managing assets on behalf of others. Yet for all the legal and financial analysis surrounding this case, another factor continued driving public fascination: the enduring mystery of Michael Jackson himself. More than 15 years after his death, people remain captivated by his story. New generations continue discovering his music. Documentaries continue examining his life. Debates continue surrounding his legacy. And every new development connected to his name instantly becomes part of a much larger cultural conversation. That conversation often extends beyond facts and enters the realm of emotion. People project hopes onto legacies. They project fears. They project memories. They project personal experiences. As a result, discussions about the estate rarely remain confined to accounting issues or legal procedures. They become symbolic. They become emotional. They become reflections of how people feel about Michael Jackson himself. Which is why this court ruling generated such powerful reactions. To some, it represented accountability. To others, it represented unnecessary conflict. To still others, it represented a reminder that even the most carefully managed legacies remain vulnerable to disagreement. And perhaps that is the most revealing aspect of the entire story. Because beneath the legal filings, beneath the headlines, beneath the social media arguments and television commentary, a simple truth remains. The Jackson legacy is still evolving. Its future is still being written. Its guardians continue making decisions that will shape how future generations experience one of music's most influential figures. And as recent events have demonstrated,